Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel for another episode of the Roots Learning series recorded within Train Simulator. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at the freeware Cumbrian coastline, which is by On Track Simulations and available on the Alan Thomson Simulation website, and also the Class 185 by Imbue Studios and Alan Thomson Simulation, and both of these are new to this channel. The scenario I'm using is one which comes with the route, set during a time when Northern hired some Class 185s from TransPennine Express for use on services between Barrow-in-Furness and Manchester Airport. Following the timetable of Train 1 Yankee 60, the 11:53 service from Barrow-in-Furness to Manchester Airport, our stops along the way, if I can pronounce all of these correctly, will include Roose, Dalton, Ulverston, Cark and Cartmel, Kent's Bank, Grange-over-Sands, Arnside, Silverdale, Carnforth, Lancaster, and finally Preston, which is as far as this route is simulated, and another driver will take over for the remainder of the journey through to Manchester Airport. The total distance for this journey is just under 56 miles. As already mentioned, the train that I'm driving for this journey is the Class 185 diesel multiple unit. The Class 185 is part of the Siemens Desiro family of trains and was manufactured by Siemens in Krefeld, Germany between 2005 and 2006, first entering service in 2006. A total of 51 three-coach units were produced, and each unit is around 71 metres or 233 feet in length and weighs around 163 tonnes. They are equipped with a Cummins QSQ 19 19-litre 6-cylinder turbo diesel engine with one fitted for each coach, with each engine rated for a power output of 750 horsepower, giving a total power output for this three-coach train of a whopping 2,250 horsepower, which is very high for a train this short. But these trains were built for very hilly routes, and that's why they were built with such a high power output. Now, from what I understand and what I was reading, TransPennine Express actually trialled an eco mode where one of the engines could be shut off at certain times to be more fuel efficient and so on, but we're not going to be driving with any kind of eco mode on this train today. We're going to be driving with all three engines active. The units have a maximum speed of 100 miles per hour, which we will be able to get up to on the latter part of this journey today after we've joined the West Coast Main Line at Carnforth. I've now jumped into the cab of the Class 185 to quickly set up the train here ready for departure. So there's a couple of things that are slightly different from the standard startup procedure that I do for most trains on this channel, but the first thing we're going to do is to turn on the master key by pressing Shift and W. And now that I've done that, I'm going to move the reversing switch, which you can see next to the master key, to the neutral position and reset the AWS self-test sequence. By default, I should mention that the driver's safety device is already turned on this train, so we don't need to press Ctrl and D to turn that on. Now, the signal ahead is displaying a clear aspect, so at this point I'm going to turn off the driver reminder appliance. Now that I've done that, we need to go over to the train management computer over here, and on the train management computer we need to acknowledge the configuration of the train. If you don't do that, then this train won't be able to move and we won't be going anywhere. So I'm just going to click on the left arrow there, and now that I've done that, at the bottom of the screen above the number 1 you can see it says acknowledge configuration, so I'm just going to do that now. And now that that's done, the configuration for the train is acknowledged and we will be able to move. The train management computer does have a lot of different settings here, so you've got the air conditioning setting if you want to change that, and then go back to the top level. We've also got traction equipment, so that just shows you the status of what's going on in the train. In addition to that, you can also, somewhere along here, I can't remember which one it's under, there we are, we've got the eco mode option. I mentioned eco mode at the start, so that's where you can turn off one of the engines. You've got lower horsepower, lower acceleration. As I think I mentioned further along in the video, as I always say, I do record these cab guides at the end, not before I've driven the journey, but after. I do say further up in the video that the acceleration rate does seem extraordinarily high, even with the 3 engines and the horsepower rating. It does seem a bit faster than I ever recall on a Class 185, but maybe it is just because when I've been on one in the past it's because eco mode was turned on or something. But yeah, we're not going to be using eco mode on this journey today. You can also control the train lighting, so you've got the saloon lighting which is turned on, emergency lighting and so on. So yeah, the train management computer is quite detailed here. Now we're going to continue around and set up the GSMR radio system. So to do that, I'm going to click on the register button. Now enter the train's head code, which is 1 Yankee 60, and then we're sat in front of signal number 12, so you type 012 and tick. Now I do have a question here actually. I don't know if anyone can answer me this in the comments, but this signal's fine because it's a 2-digit signal, and if you've got 3-digit signals it's fine, but what are you supposed to enter into the GSMR radio system for a 4-digit signal? There's a lot of routes around and a lot of signals that I see where the signal might be like, I don't know, 1260. What are you supposed to enter if that's the case when there's only room to put in 3 digits? So if you know the answer to that, please let me know in the comments because I'm really not sure. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm going to turn on the headlights and I'm going to press H twice to put the headlights into the daytime setting. I did notice that the headlights seem to be a bit bright. I'm not sure if that's just because I had to reload the journey at one point and they became brighter from that point in the journey, because I did make a mistake a bit further up, so I reloaded it and re-recorded that section. Or it's just that the headlights for some reason are shining brighter than they should be. So yeah, now let's just take a quick look at the cab controls. So over here we've got the power and brake controllers. So we have 5 notches of power from the off position. So you've got off there, so that's neutral, and then we got to 5 notches of power. If you go up to the max notch, or notch 5, before we reach 20 miles per hour, you will only have 4 notches of power available to you, and only once we reach 20 miles per hour will we be able to have the power from the 5th notch. So you'll hear the engine suddenly whir up a bit more when we're doing 20, or as we reach 20, if the power brake controller is already in notch 5. Going the other way, we have a smoothly controlled brake, so you can make very fine movements to try and control the brake force. And I must say the brakes on this train are very good, using a mixture of air braking and engine braking, and I do love the sound of the engine brakes. You'll hear a very distinctive whine as we're slowing down. Now the brake gauge is the one to the top right of the cab there, so the red needle is the brake cylinder pressure gauge. The higher that's pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied. But on this particular train, I'm not really going to be using the brake gauge to judge how hard the brakes are applied, but instead over here we have the brake percentage gauge, which shows you how much percentage of brake you're using. Now generally I try to not go above 40%. Sometimes it might slip up above 40% as it's quite difficult to get the setting quite where you want it, but generally I'm aiming for no more than 40% braking and less than that if possible. So of course in front of us here we've got a nice easy to read speedometer measured in miles per hour with a red line marking the maximum speed for this train of 100 miles per hour. I should also mention that this train is fitted with a TPWS system, which I'm not going to talk too much about. It doesn't, or it certainly won't come on this journey. Now somewhere around here, I can't remember where it is now, I'm looking for the horn control. I think, oh no, I haven't found it yet. Oh, there we are. It was just below the speedometer. Yep, so we've got a 2-tone horn there, controllable with the spacebar and the B key. The final thing that we need to do before setting off for departure is to set the departure boards on the outside of the train, and I will do that with the F7 and F8 keys. I won't show you the process, but just know that it's F7 and F8. Well, for this livery anyway, it's done slightly differently for some of the other liveries of the Class 185 that come with this pack. And also there are announcements on certain routes as well with the Class 185, but the announcements don't work on the route that I'm driving here today, so we won't be using them on this journey. So now we've set up the Class 185 ready for departure, let's depart and head out on our journey towards Preston. As we depart away from Barrow-in-Furness, the speed limit here is 15 miles per hour, with around 1 3/4 miles to go to our first stop, which is Roose. And the speed limit went quickly up to 60 miles per hour after departure there, but we've got a 20 mile per hour speed limit coming up for these crossover points in a moment as we cross over onto the correct track, so I'm not going to accelerate to any faster than 20 at this point. And now we've crossed over to the correct track. The speed limit's going up to 60 miles per hour, but only around half a mile to go to an upcoming 40 mile per hour speed limit. We can accelerate as we pass the signal that we just passed on the left hand side there. So I'll go into full power, but I'm not going to accelerate much above 40 miles per hour. And we're just passing the 40 warning there now. So what I'll do is I'll accelerate to about 45 or so, then I'll cut off the power and then start slowing down back to 40 in a moment. So now I've got some light braking just to bring us down to 40 in time. I think the limit starts around the beginning of this left-hand curve. Actually, maybe slightly further. As you can see, it's a bit light here, and then the curve sharpens out, and there's the 40 mile per hour speed post coming up. At this point, we've got around a mile to go to our stop, and we need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed. As we pass under these power lines, straight after the junction that we've just passed, we've got around half a mile to go. And now you can see the overbridge coming up just ahead on this left-hand curve. I'm now going to apply the brakes as the platform appears very quickly after that overbridge. Here at Roose Station, I want to stop at the S sign at the end of the platform, and it should also be pointed out that the speed limit has increased to 60 miles per hour just before we entered the platform. And we should now be stopping in just about the right place. As we depart away from Roose, the speed limit here is 60 miles per hour, with around 3 1/4 miles to go to the next stop, which is Dalton. And I realise they're actually stopped slightly short of the S sign, but I don't think it matters too much when you look at the platform. The train certainly managed to fit in there okay. Should also mention on departure from Roose Station, we had around 3/4 of a mile to go to an upcoming 40 mile per hour speed limit. And we're now coming up on the warning for that limit now, so I'm going to cut the power back to idle and allow the train to coast. The speed limit drops to 40 miles per hour just before we reach the next curve, so I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just to ensure that we slow down in time. slowed down a bit too hard and a bit too quickly. You can see the 40 mph speed post just coming up though. I'm still trying to get used to driving this Class 185. The brakes are better than perhaps you might expect. The same with the acceleration. I do think this thing kind of accelerates a bit like a rocket almost. Definitely seems to accelerate quicker than I remember them doing so in real life. But yeah, it's definitely a train that I like, and it was very much a missing hole within Train Simulator. We're actually now on an upgrade of 1 in 95, so I'm having to use a bit more power than perhaps I would do normally. So at the whistle post there, we had around 2 miles to go. Slight bug in the route here. We're about to go through part of a hillside to enter this next tunnel. The gradient has now just changed to a rather steep 1 in 86 gradient after the tunnel there. And at the next signal, we've got just over 1¼ miles to go. There's 1 in 86 grade. You need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to maintain the speed, but the gradient should be shallowing in a moment. Mistakenly put the brakes on there, and I do find it fiddly sometimes to find that neutral point on the power handle with this train. So as we're crossing this junction, we've got around 3/4 mile to go. I think we are still on an upgrade as I've got the power in notch 1 and we're barely accelerating. Certainly as we head towards this tunnel, the grade is up 1 in 101, and I'm going to idle the power now as we enter this tunnel, and the train will begin to lose speed. The grade will be levelling in this tunnel, but it will be changing to a down 1 in 97 grade. Sorry, correction, up 1 in 97 grade again before our stop. And you can now see the platforms coming up just ahead. Here at Dalton, I want to stop at the S sign, which is by the stairs near the end of the platform. Didn't mean to give us power there, I was just trying to release the braking momentarily, just to allow the train to coast towards that side as we were going to stop a bit too early. I think another reason for sort of the braking, and probably braking harder than you need to, is just the sensation of speed in this train seems to be quite a lot higher than it is with other trains, so the camera is placed a bit further back and so on. But we should now be stopped in just about the right place. As we depart away from Dalton, the speed limit here is still 40 miles per hour, and we started on a 1 in 97 upgrade, and I could not find any way to prevent the train from rolling back as we started on that grade. I've looked through the manual to see if I could find a hill start button or any mention of one, but I couldn't find that. So it was just a case of the brakes were on quite high, just whack it straight up to full power and see if we can get the train moving without a rollback. But unfortunately the train did still roll back, so I'm not quite sure if there's a way to fix that or not, or if I'm just missing something and there actually is a hill start button. So if you do know about that, then please let me know in the comments. So as we departed away from Dalston, sorry, not Dalston, I mean Dalton, we had around 4.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Ulverston. So we're continuing on this upgrade for a while now until this tunnel coming up, in fact, in a moment, and then the grade is going to shallow out again before the tunnel exit. Sorry, yeah, before the tunnel exit, and then we will have a short upward grade again a short time after that. So we've now got a short 1 in 103 upward gradient, which will shallow out again soon. I do note at this point that the track texture has changed to a very old rusty track. I think I can see what they're doing there, and but I have to say, of course, the railhead itself, which the wheels sit on, shouldn't actually be rusty, because the trains themselves are what clean the rust off. So obviously the more used a route is, then the shinier those rails will be, and this isn't the busiest route around, but there are enough trains that I think that it shouldn't look as rusty as it does here. That being said, I do think that this is a very high quality freeware route, and I'm glad to have downloaded it, and I look forward to future extensions. It does go further than Barrow-in-Furness, up to a place called Millom, but what I'm really looking for is for them to extend it all the way to Carlisle, as I think it would be great to be able to drive from Preston to Carlisle via the Cumbrian coast, especially if you can do something interesting like doing it in a Class 37. Class 37s were used on this route for quite some time. I'm not sure if they still are or not. I think it was top and tail 37s with some old Mark II or Mark III coaches, if I remember correctly. I think it might have been the Mark IIs actually. The gradient is now about to change to down 1 in 107 on this rather long straight here shortly before the next curve. So at this point I'm then going to need to use the brakes to start controlling the speed, and at the start of this curve we've got around 2 miles to go. Struggling with the power handle again to get it back into the neutral position. Just managed to succeed, but obviously we're going to have to use the brakes again in a moment. The next thing I'm looking out for along here now is going to be a 20 mile per hour warning, so a more with board warning for an upcoming 20 limit, but the 20 limit itself is after our next stop. So now I've reached the 20 warning. And now we've passed that 20 warning. The speed limit somewhere along here goes up to 60 miles per hour. Yep, there's the 60 mile per hour speed post, but we've only got around 2/3 of a mile to go to our stop, so I'm not going to accelerate. I'm just going to allow the train to coast and gain a little bit of speed. Then I'm going to apply the brakes at the next signal, and at Ulverston station we want to stop at the S sign near the end of the platform. The grade has also now levelled out before Ulverston station, so if you were driving in the opposite direction, you shouldn't get any rollback when departing away from here. And as you can see just here, the speed limit is immediately dropping to 20 miles per hour just before the end of the platform there, so that will be our starting speed limit. And we should now be stopped in just about the right place. As we departed away from Ulverston, as mentioned earlier, the speed limit is 20 miles per hour, though it's very quickly going up to 60 miles per hour just here, with just over 5.5 miles to go to our next stop, which is Cark and Cartmel. And just as we pass the 60 post there, we've started on another downgrade of 1 in 65, so now I'm going to accelerate up towards 50 miles per hour, and then at that point I'm going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast. The headlights looked too bright for a moment. I had to reload as I made a mistake on the previous run to the next stop, and this train doesn't like reloading. I had to go through the entire setup procedure all over again to fix a few problems, so we're probably running a minute or two down now, but that's not to worry. That's probably par for the course with a lot of British trains, to be honest. So yeah, we're coasting up towards 60 miles per hour now, and I will use the brakes to control the speed if necessary. The gradient has now levelled out, so I'm going to give us a notch of power to bring us up towards 60, and then I need to go between idle and notch 1 to maintain that speed. is no more significant gradient change or speed changes between here and Cark and Cartmel. Coming up soon is going to be a very long bridge. At that point we've got around 3 miles to go. Continuing between Idle, sorry, I'll get my words right in a second, between Idle and Notch 1 along here. It's a very scenic part of the route, I think. It's great to be sort of skirting around the edge of the Lake District, and then of course you've got the Irish Sea on the right hand side. What I'm looking out for along here now is going to be a crossing. It's the only crossing between Ulverston and Cark and Cartmel. At the crossing we've got around half a mile to go, and then I'm going to brake shortly after that to slow down for our stop. So we've just reached the end of the wall on the right hand side there, and this crossing is now coming up with the house next to it. So in a moment I'm going to apply the brakes as we reach the next underbridge just coming up. And it's here where I messed up on the previous run and had to reload, as I'd actually forgotten to write down the braking point in my notes, and I misjudged it a bit and ended up overshooting the stopping point at our stop. So I've got the brakes on a bit harder and a bit earlier than I did on the previous run, so we should now be able to stop in the right place. Here at Cark and Cartmel, I want to stop at the 4/3 car stop sign, which is not as close to the end as I thought it was. It's probably closer to 2/3 of the way along the platform. And you can see it now just coming up on the left hand side there. So we should now be stopped in just about the right place. As we depart away from Cark and Cartmel, the speed limit here is still 60 miles per hour with just under 2.5 miles to go to the next stop at Kent's Bank and just under a mile to go to an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit. So the AWS warning that we just passed doesn't apply to us for any speed changes or anything like that. I'm now cutting the power back. Actually, I think it does. I think it might be a crossing warning, as the speed limit that comes into force is actually for a crossing coming up just ahead. So I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment to slow us down to 50 as we approach some trackside boxes. I can just see them coming up on the left now. So I've got some light braking just to bring our speed down in time. And we're now down to 50 miles per hour in time for that crossing. So yeah, that AWS warning, actually I'm not sure that was a crossing, but still that AWS warning did apply to us as it was warning us of a crossing speed restriction being imposed. However, the speed limit does now remain at 50 miles per hour pretty much all of the way to Kent's Bank station. And here's the crossing that the speed limit referred to, I think, and the gates were still going down. Not sure that that's quite accurate. At least it's not quite as bad as my bang straight through a bus moment on the East Coast Mainline video a few years ago, which I actually interestingly looked at the stats on that video. You can see the parts of the video that people have watched the most, and the audience retention for that part just jumps straight up. There's a huge spike. So a lot of people have watched that moment over and over. So at this whistle post on this left-hand curve, we've got around half a mile to go. I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop just after the rocks on the right-hand side end. So we're just coming up to the end now. And now I'm going to make a brake application to bring our speed down. And here at Kent's Bank station, I want to stop at the S sign at the end of the platform, and the speed limit is increasing to 60 miles per hour, as you can see at that speed post just before we reach our stop. 60 is, of course, the maximum speed limit along this line, right up until we get to Carnforth and join the West Coast Main Line. You can just see a small S on the post at the end of the platform. So I'm just giving us some light braking now, and we should now be stopping in just about the right place. As we depart away from Kent's Bank, the speed limit here is still 60 miles per hour with just over 1 3/4 miles to go to the next stop, which is Grange-over-Sands. now going to coast at the whistle post that we've just passed, as we're just over 3/4 of a mile from an upcoming 50 mph speed limit. And at the signal just coming up, we've got around half a mile to go to that 50 limit and a mile to go to our stop. Just as we reach the end of this left-hand curve, I'm just going to make a light brake application to bring our speed down to 50 in time. Some of the speed posts along here are the old-style speed posts, which are just yellow writing with no background, so they can be quite difficult to see sometimes. And we're just passing that 50 post now. I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop just as we've passed this wall on the left hand side that sort of steps down. As soon as we pass that, that's the braking point for Grange-over-Sands station. And here at Grange-over-Sands we once again want to stop at the S sign at the end of the platform. You can just see that S sign on the final lamppost, along with the passengers must not pass this point sign. And so we should now be stopping in just about the right place. As we depart away from Grange-over-Sands, the speed limit is back up to 60 mph, with around 3¼ miles to go to the next stop, which is Arnside. Once again, as we get to 60 mph, it's now between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain that speed. There's one speed change along here after we cross a large bridge, and at that point we're going to have a speed change just to 5 mph down to 55 mph. At this distance signal on this right hand curve, we've got around 1¼ miles to go. We're now reaching the large bridge that I mentioned earlier, so I'm not going to give us any power, and I'm just going to apply some light braking as we get towards the end of the bridge to ensure that we are down to 55 miles per hour. And then once we've reached the end of the bridge, we've got, I think it's around half a mile, maybe a tiny bit less to go. So I will continue the braking for our stop. And you can now see the platform at Arnside coming up. Here at Arnside, I want to stop at the 3-car stop sign, which is around 2/3 of a way along the platform. I'm just looking and trying to see if I can see that 3-car stop sign. I think it might be just beyond the footbridge, as I haven't spotted it yet. Oh, now I see it. It's just on the... Give us a tiny bit of power. We did slow down too early there. I couldn't quite work out where it was, but it's on the next lamppost just coming up on the left-hand side. We should now be stopped in just about the right place. As we departed away from Arnside, the speed limit was still 55 miles per hour, though it's very quickly going up to 60 miles per hour at this speed post, with around 2.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Silverdale. I did notice on one of the platforms, the end of the platforms at Arnside, that it seemed to be missing. It's like a bit of a hole there, and the passengers must not cross this point sign was kind of floating. So I do wonder if I'm actually missing some assets potentially for this route, though I'm not sure if I am or not. I do seem to meet all the requirements if I read it up correctly when I was looking at it on the Alan Thomson Simulation website. Accidentally applied the brakes there, trying to control, get the power handle back into neutral, so let's give us some power to bring us back up towards 60 once again. So at the whistle post just there, we had around 3/4 of a mile to go to an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit, so I'm going to allow the train to coast at this point, and I'm going to brake lightly to bring our speed down to 50 on the next left-hand curve. Down to 50 just in time. Release the brakes now, and I'm going to allow the train to coast for a moment. I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop on this next right hand curve as we pass an underbridge. So we're just coming up on that underbridge now. So now I can put on the brakes for our stop at Silverdale station. Might have braked slightly too early there, just going to cut back on the braking for a moment and now reapply as we approach the platform. Here at Silverdale I want to stop at a 3-car stop sign, which is shortly before a white fence which crosses the platform, sort of blocking off the end that you can see coming up just ahead. And we should now be stopping in just about the right place. As we departed away from Silverdale, the speed limit was 50 miles per hour, though is very quickly going up to 60 miles per hour at this speed post just here, with just over 3¼ miles to go to the next stop, which is Carnforth. Power right back as we've reached 60 miles per hour. Once again we need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed. Along here now, the next signal is 1¼ miles from an upcoming 35 mile per hour speed limit, and we're going to have 2 speed changes as we approach Carnforth, one down to 35 and then a second change down to just 10 miles per hour. We've now reached that signal, so we've got 1¼ miles to go to an upcoming 35 mile per hour speed limit and 1¾ miles to go. So we've now come up on the warning for the upcoming 35 speed limit. I'm just going to allow the train to coast at this point, and I'm going to apply the brakes at around 30% at the second overbridge after the 35 warning. So we're down to 35 in time there, and now the limit's 35. We've got just under half a mile to go to the upcoming 10 mile per hour speed limit. The 10 mile per hour speed limit comes into force shortly after the next signal. I'm just allowing the train to continue to coast for now, and then I'll apply the brakes to slow down as we approach the next AWS ramp. struggling to release the brakes there for a moment. But yeah, the speed limit's now 10 miles per hour. I'm just going to allow the train to coast into Carnforth station. Here at Carnforth, we want to stop at the S sign near the end of the platform. Giving us a tiny bit of power now, just because we're slowing down a little bit too much there. You think, say we were doing probably 7 miles per hour, and 7 to 10 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like a 30% difference, which is quite significant in the grand scheme of things, especially when we're running late, as I mentioned earlier. And now I'm braking as I thought we were coming to the stopping point, but we're not quite there yet. I can just see it coming up now on the left-hand side, the next lamppost just coming up. So we should now be stopped in just about the right place. As we depart away from Carnforth, the speed limit is still 10 miles per hour, though soon increasing to 15 miles per hour at the end of the platform here, with just over 6¼ miles to go to the next stop, which is Lancaster. And of course at this point we're now joining the West Coast Main Line, which will be on for the remainder of the journey to Preston. I've idled at 10 miles per hour just to allow the train to coast for now. We can accelerate up towards 15 just as we reach this first crossover here. So now I've reached the crossover, I can give us some low power just to accelerate up towards 15 miles per hour, and then once again shut off the power to allow the train to coast. Power shut off, and after joining the main line, the speed limit here is 110 miles per hour, or 100 miles per hour for us, and we can accelerate just as we reach the end of that point on the right hand side. So now I'm going straight up to full power, though of course we won't get full power until we've reached 20 miles per hour. That's when notch 5 will kick in. The speed limit here is 125 miles per hour for tilting trains, such as the Pendolino or the Class 221 Super Voyager, though I don't think you'd really get any tilting Super Voyagers this far up the route, so it's mainly for Pendolinos. Now that we're reaching 100 miles per hour, we need to drop back to notch 2 of power, and that should pretty much hold us at 100. it might, well, basically the acceleration rate is extremely low in notch 2, so you can leave it in that for long periods, but occasionally you might just need to drop it back to notch 1 for a few seconds, just to ensure that the train doesn't end up breaking the speed limit. Towards Morecambe has just diverged away from us to the right. We've now got a flashing double yellow signal. I'm now going to idle the power and allow the train to coast at this point. We've got around 1¼ miles to go from that flashing double yellow signal to an upcoming 75 mph speed limit. And we're now passing the warning for that 75 itself. Now got some light braking to start bringing our speed off. The 75 limit comes into force shortly after the next signal, and you can just see that flashing single yellow coming up ahead now. Now have a further warning for an upcoming 40 mph speed limit for our diversionary route to the left hand side. At the next signal coming up, we've got just under ½ mile to go to that 40 limit. And with that signal's just jumped up to green, I was braking because it was showing a solid single yellow, but now let's just continue our braking and slow down to 40 mph. We are now down to 40 in time for this junction here, where the speed limit comes into force, and then the speed limit's further dropping to 30 mph just as we enter the platform here. It was difficult to work out the right stopping point here at Lancaster. It's a bit of an estimation, so I want to stop near the end of the platform roof. Correction, there are actually some stop signs. I actually forgot about that, and I didn't put them in my notes. I thought that I'd guessed it here at Lancaster, but nope, we've got some stop signs, so this should be roughly the correct place to stop. As we depart away from Lancaster, the speed limit here is still 30 mph, though it will soon be going up to 75 mph, with around 21 miles to go to the next and final stop, which is Preston. So now I've crossed onto the main line, the speed limit has jumped to 75 mph, and we can accelerate just at the orange wire cover that was just going under the tracks there. So now we can go up to full power to accelerate up towards 75. cutting the power back for a moment. We're going to round this sharp right-hand curve, and then after we've ended this curve, the speed limit is going up to 110 miles per hour, or 100 miles per hour for us. And we've just passed the 110 speed post, so now we can go up to full power to accelerate up to 100 miles per hour. And we're now going to be doing 100 pretty much all of the way to Preston until the speed changes that come into effect on the approach to Preston. Once again, as we reach 100 miles per hour, we need to go, well, between notches 1 and 2 of power, but mostly in notch 2, only dropping to notch 1 if it looks like that we might exceed 100 miles per hour. So following on from my comments in the previous video, the York to Sunderland video, this is the second of the 4 train simulator videos that I'm working on right now. The next 2, not in any particular order, are the Ramsgate to Victoria Southeastern Class 375 video and the Crewe to Holyhead North Wales Coast Route in the Transport for Wales Class 175. So I'm hoping that those are the next 2 videos that I release. It's probably more likely that I'll get the North Wales video done before the Ramsgate to Victoria video done, for the simple reason it feels like there's more variety, because when you're driving a Class 375, the cab looks pretty much identical to the cab of the Class 387, which of course I recently used in an almost 2-hour video between Kings Lynn and London King's Cross. So for the sake of a bit more variety, I'm trying to make that video, I think probably going to make that video the last one of the 4. And then after that I'm hoping to focus on 3 or 4 Train Sim World 2 videos before coming back to Train Simulator again. There's certainly a lot of videos that I've got in the planning, and as I have mentioned on my Facebook page, I am hoping to do a full run along the Great Western Main Line between Penzance and London Paddington, via of course Plymouth, Exeter, and then via the route via Westbury towards Reading and then London Paddington. So that's a video I'm very interested in doing, set in the modern day in a Class 800. Secondary to that, as we're on the West Coast Main Line, I can also mention that I would love to, at some point, though I don't know how soon it will be done, also do a full run of the West Coast Main Line between Glasgow Central and London Euston, probably in a Class 390 Pendolino, just to speed things up a bit. Although I do note that Armstrong Powerhouse have recently come out with their Class 87. That would be great to use, though it wouldn't be suitable so much in that direction, as the locos always came out from the London end. It was loco at the front of the train when departing Euston and heading north, and DVT at the front of the train when heading south towards London. So unless it's a kind of a drag thing, it wouldn't be suited for a southbound video. But I would like to obviously make a video in the Class 87, perhaps doing a video from London Euston to Birmingham New Street, or maybe even London Euston to Liverpool Lime Street, something like that. So that Morpeth warning didn't apply to us. It's warning of a 40 mph speed limit entering a loop on a point to the left in a moment. But at the start of that loop, we've got around half a mile to go to an upcoming 95 mph speed limit, and around a mile to go to an upcoming 80 mph speed limit. So I'm going to coast in a moment at the start of the loop and allow the train to coast down towards 95. Here's the loop starting now on the left hand side. I've now cut the power back to idle, and I'm going to apply the brakes very lightly to bring us down to 95 at this next overbridge just here. Just a couple of miles an hour we need to lose. And now I've just released the brakes and I'm going to allow the train to continue to coast. I'm going to brake for the upcoming 80 mph speed limit at the next signal. It should also be noted, if this signal is a double yellow, as it is, then we are not cleared into Preston station. So we're down to 80 in time, but I'm just going to allow the train to slow down a bit more because of the double yellow signal aspect there. Also at the 80 post there, we had a warning for an upcoming 35 mph speed limit, which is around 2/3 of a mile from the speed limit itself. With this signal now being single yellow, we are still not cleared into Preston station. I'm increasing the braking to ensure that we are slowing down in time. Bit of lag here, I must say, as we approach Preston. Hopefully that will fix itself in a moment. Just released the brakes as we're now going slow enough that we should be able to stop at any red signal. I think I might have slowed down a little bit too early, but it's best to be safe than sorry, as they say. The line from Blackpool should be joining us now on the right hand side. I should have probably continued braking there actually to a bit of a slower speed. I mean, it's fine, we're going to stop in front of this signal okay, but ideally I try to head over an AWS ramp at no faster than 20 mph, just to be on the safe side. So now we're going to be stopped at this signal until the platform at Preston is clear. So, oh, it cleared straight away actually. So yeah, we're now cleared into platform 6 at Preston station. The speed limit is now 35 mph with just under half a mile to go. I'm going to coast at just above 30 mph along here, and then I'm going to brake approaching the station, and we need to stop at the 3/4 car stop sign around halfway along the platform. If I remember rightly, the 3/4 car stop sign is quite close to the end of the platform on the opposite track. Oh, it's just coming up on the right. We might overshoot it. No, we won't. I did use a bit of hard braking. Or maybe slightly overshot, but it's okay. It's not too bad. we're now stopping in roughly the correct place. I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching this video, even with all the little technicalities I was having with the brakes there, running slightly late. We still made it to Preston on time, otherwise you wouldn't have seen that red signal just before we entered the platform here. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, for the latest channel updates, you can find me on Facebook with the link to my Facebook page in the video description at facebook.com/ptgrail. If you'd like to sponsor this channel, then please visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/ptgrail. And again, the link for that is in the video description. And finally, if you're interested in my travel or wildlife photography, then please check out at PTG Travelling on Instagram. People do say that they like my photos. I'm trying to get more followers on there at the minute, as I'm trying to promote my photography as a second side gig to YouTube. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching.